Okay, here we go. This will be the assembly video for the Spectre 6 Ezra lightsaber from Rebels. Before you get started, you're going to want a couple things that aren't included in the kit. Some sort of cutter, because we have one bolt, unfortunately, that needs to get chopped down. It doesn't have to look like this. Any kind of bolt cutter will do. Some sort of files to file that bolt down. I have these here. You're going to need some tape, some double-sided tape. I have this little piece here, and just a dab of glue. Any kind of super glue or epoxy glue will do. Okay. So let's open this up, and this should be about how you will receive the kit. There'll be some paper inside of here and a divider which helps keeps all the parts in place. You will notice that the box is huge compared to what's inside. This was an unfortunate production mistake where the box and the foam was made well oversized, so in order to get it down to the correct size, the foam had to be chopped down. Well, not the correct size, but the correct weight. There was a problem with the weight. It would end up costing double the amount to actually ship it, as well as taking 4 to 6 weeks in some cases to arrive. So I opted to make the foam look a little bit nasty just because what's the foam? It's clothes inside of a box and it's going into an attic or in the garbage or wherever you happen to do with it. So that's what I opted to do to make sure you guys get your saber. So let's go ahead and unpack this stuff. You're going to have the main saber here. That's in the center pocket. On the side pocket, you're going to have your nameplate and the stand. Going to have a little, another plastic packet full of goodies. Another bag of goodies. Going to have this this emitter ring, which is for a bladed style. You got a cap, and then you're going to have 2 end caps. You're going to have your static, and then your sound vented one. So box is empty. Let's go ahead and toss this to the side now. So now that we got everything here, first step, open the bags and separate everything out. So you're going to notice some different things here. You're going to have this little piece. There is a plastic insert inside of it. You'll notice there's a second insert. There's one with a hole and one without a hole. It's up to you which one you decide you like better. The hole goes to the outside, as you can see by the shape of it. Yeah. So that's up to you. You pick one you want. You're going to have 2 screws like this. And then you're going to have another one inside this little bag here. There's a difference between these screws, and that's why they're separated. You take a look here, you'll see there is a bezel here at a different level. Those are important when we screw them in, okay? So let's just set those to the side. You're going to have your control box and then the piece that goes on top of the control box to cover the switches and the screws. You have your door for the side of the saber. Heat sink for the blaster. Heat sink for the saber. This copper ring covers or screws onto the blaster area. Have a little switch here with a nut on the bottom. The red blaster to saber switch. A D-ring that is very easy to fit. We have the cover over the blaster area like you've already seen. Let's go ahead and open the second bag. So you're going to want to be careful when you empty the second bag because there's little screws in there, which you'll need to make sure you keep track of. There are 4 screws which are in a separate bag. These are very important. You don't lose them or misplace them, anything, because they have been specially machined in order to fit on this. So be very careful with these 4 screws. Keep them in the bag until you need them. You'll have 2 loose screws. These are a similar screw, but they've got a different size on the head. So these will be used for attaching the control box on the back. Again, you have the second screw, which I told you about. If you'll notice, this screw has the little bezel is much closer to the shaft. And it's a bit shinier. It's a little bit of a different shape. Okay? So we'll keep those down here. Let's actually move them over a little bit so it's all in view. Okay. You're going to have your 3 Allen wrenches. Small, medium, large. These will fit all of the Allen holes that are in this saber. 1, 2, 3. You got a little black nubby. This is a detail greebly, goes on the back of the saber. You'll see where. You have 2 little set screws. One is for the heatsink. One is for the blade retention, if you choose to use it. It could be that you don't use either of these because you just want a static display. But these are here. And then you'll also notice a stack of magnets. These should all be held together. They should be sticking onto all the metal that you have. Now, there's really one magnet you're going to use, this big one. The smaller ones are possible to use. It's up to you if you want to try to use them and make them work. I'll show you what they're for. So if you want to make sure you don't lose your screws, you could probably just keep the magnets close by. The plastic stops that for some reason. Okay, so here's all the parts laid out. The nameplate's very easy. You're simply going to take it out of the plastic bag and it slides right in to your housing. If it's on display, it doesn't really matter. It's just going to sit there. It still will slide back and forth nice and comfortably. But if you want to make sure it stays in place, maybe you put a little spacer behind it, a piece of paper or something to give it a little bit of extra friction. That'll help. I wouldn't suggest gluing it in there or taping it down because maybe you want to use the stand for something else. Maybe you like a different stand, whatever. You glue it in, it's not going anywhere anymore. Okay, so now we got the saber. What we're going to do first is we're going to disassemble this entire thing. We're going to take it down to individual parts. Most of you will get your saber looking like this with this level of assembly. There are some that have been assembled a little bit more, just a few things screwed in, or a little bit less, but this is about what you're going to get. What you're going to notice is sometimes on this green one, you're going to pull it out of the box and you're going to see some dirt on it. This is just part of the process they used in order to turn this into a more matte color on this green. It's just dust. It wipes right off. If you notice any problems on your metal, like little scratches or any kind of issues that you don't like from cleanliness perspective, you can always get a little sanding sponge or Scotch-Brite pads. They'll buff it right up. You want to be careful with steel wool. Just not too much, but steel wool can sometimes leave little pieces behind into the aluminum, and which can ultimately rust over time. But I wouldn't worry too much about that. If you have any issues with the metal, a little tiny scratches you don't like, it's easy enough to buff it out. Get some more some finer sandpaper or the Scotch-Brite pad, and then clean it up, a polishing cloth, and then you'll have a nice neat surface again. The microfiber cloth will clean them very well. You can use some Windex as a cleaner if you want to get it nice and shiny. Aluminum's not too bad with fingerprints, but they will get fingerprinted if you're not careful. So let's go ahead and do some disassembly. This emitter area here, this simply unscrews. If it's screwed in and it's too tight, You don't need to get pliers on it. You could if you wanted to, but really they're all finger tightened. And so you get it and you just kind of give it a little bit of wiggling back and forth while you try to turn it, and it'll turn loose. The screws on these are very good. The threads are very nice, so they screw in very well and securely. Then you're going to have your collar here that pops off. And now you're seeing some more exposed bits here. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to get the little screw or little Allen wrench. And you see these 4 bolts up here. We're going to loosen them up and take them out. Actually, we're going to leave that last one in, and you'll see why. Now, inside here, you're going to see 4 more. It's like a little puzzle here. Very well designed to keep everything hidden. You're going to want to release these 4 screws as well. And you'll see why I left the last one in. It's not a big deal. I just left it there because a little bit of a pain in the butt to get them out, but it's possible. Now, the screws are different. The screws from the top and the screws from the bottom. Not dramatically so, and it might not be an issue either way, but just so you're aware, I'll show you. The screws that come out of the inside here are shorter than the screws that come out of the top. I'll take a look if you can tell. They're just a touch shorter. So just keep that in mind when you're putting it together. What you'll notice is if the screws on the top are too long, if you've used long screws, they'll hang down inside of your chamber here. It actually doesn't harm anything or cause any trouble. It's just to give you an idea. Let's go ahead and finish these screws in here. One left. Now, because these are really small screws, you need to be careful not to over tighten them. Tighten them good, but don't really wrench them down. That's why these little Allen wrenches are small. If you have a tool that you're using, it's very easy to over tighten them, possibly strip the head inside. Just be careful. So these all come out. Now what happens is your saber is able to separate because these screws in here are holding these 2 parts together. Now, there's a little indentation inside of here where they fit together. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to flex this back a little bit to remove it from that indentation, and then gently, gingerly push up on your emitter section. And it's going to come off. And then your copper ring will come off. Note about the copper ring and all the copper parts on here. These are natural full copper. They will be tarnished. You'll see them, they'll already be tarnished. If you don't like the tarnished look, you have the possibility to buff it out, just like everything else. You can see the coloration here. You can buff a little bit, start to clean it off, and you can get it to shine up real nice again. Polishing cloth. You can get your shine back on your copper if you want to clean it off. If you want to keep the shine and keep it at a fresh copper look, you're going to need to seal it. So there's sealing wax or a clear coat paint you can put onto it. Choice is yours. I like the idea of the weathered piece. Now, this last screw I left in, you'll see that it's holding this little block in here. You're going to need to remove this completely. So last screw out. And this little block will slide out. Boom, done. Now, because this is a puzzle, see that inside this hole right here, you can't really see it, there you go. You can see that a screw has been exposed. So that's your big Allen wrench. Stick it in, spin it out. Now, your green box is able to separate from the main piece here. You can take the screw out, it comes right out the top if you like. We'll just leave it in there. Okay. Now you're ending up like this. So your next screw takes your medium hex or Allen wrench, goes in through this back hole right here. But it's not ready yet because this is still attached. It's just in there right now with nothing holding it down. So very gently kind of wiggle it out and get it out. It's got a specific place and keys that hold it into the right spot so that you can't put it in incorrectly. So if you put it in like this, it won't go. These pieces will bind together if you're being too rough with them. They fit together well, but if you put them together and start wrenching them together, you could get them bound up, and that's on you. So these parts should all separate. They may feel tight. What you're going to do is give it a little bit of a wiggle, and a little bit of wiggling back and forth and trying to find the exact right position, and they'll slide apart. Same with these other pieces that are fitting on the tube. Okay. So now that the main grip there is removed, you'll see that this hole has now exposed a second hole inside the back. So you're going to insert in through the back end and unbolt here. You don't need to do all of this disassembly. This is just if you want to bring it down to base parts, if you're doing some sort of, if you want to do some extra weathering or whatnot. So the sabers, which are coming from me, which will be chemically weathered, so medium and high weathering, they're going to come disassembled unless you ordered specifically assembled. So they're going to come in their full individual parts like you see it now, because the chemical process is going to need to separate pieces in order to ensure that I can weather them correctly. So you'll see this little block has fallen out, and we'll get these all back together in a second. So there's the fully disassembled setup. Bringing it all back together is just reversing the process. So your piece here is going to have a very specific fit. You're going to see this little overhang, and you're going to see a little keyed location where it goes into. Simply fits in here like this. Then you'll see that there's a little screw hole that comes in the bottom of here, and a matching screw hole here, and a slot where this all fits into. Oh, there we go. Put it up. Now, your screw that you pulled out goes back in, if you can get it in. Slides back in, and you begin the tightening process. It's again not too tight, just give it a nice little snug. The seat fits nice and tightly. Okay, now that that's done, we're going to put this back on. See how nicely it fits in. A little bit of wiggles for the last little bit, and you're in there good. And you'll know that you got it good because you can take it right back out again if you wanted to. Boom, that's done. Next, we're going to put our blaster section back on. Now, these grooves here aren't actual grooves that are matched in here. It just simply fits on. It can still slide back and forth, but that's why you have the bolt down in here. That'll find the home it needs. If you're having a hard time getting the bolt to find its location, you can simply just kind of stick the bolt in and find its location and then start twisting to screw it down. Nice and snug. Boom. Next step done. Okay. Reverse again. Copper ring goes on. Again, this is the same as this bottom area. It could be that you feel it doesn't fit right, but that's just because it's got a very tight tolerance and it fits in its exact way. So if it doesn't slide on smoothly, be very careful. You need to try to find the right angle, and it should end up fitting on real nicely. Now, what you need to be careful of, before you put this piece on, you need to make sure you get your block back in. The flat end should go in, pointing towards the inside of the saber. Put it in like this. Take your short screws and screw them down. Not too tight. You don't want them stripping the heads. Okay. Put this back on. Again, remember, you need to give it a little bit of pressure, backwards pressure, in order to get it there. And also, this is also a very tight fit. So again, you're going to need to find the exact right positioning to get it together. So be very cautious, very easy. So it finds the right location. It should slide in nice and smoothly. And then you'll see that this has then, if it's sticking out like this, where there's too much of a gap, wiggle it around until you find the right position. It should fit right in. Okay. Now that that's done, let's go ahead and put these screws in. These are a little bit of a pain in the butt to get back in because of the overhang nature of it. So you got to kind of hold it upside down, or to the side at least, get them in there, and then you can do it. So before I screw these all in, here's something I want to do. Let's release this a little bit. You want this to, as you're assembling, you want this to still be able to move back and forth, this headpiece, because it's important that we have a little bit of motion in order to get the screws in there correctly. So you have your two screws that are the same with the large bezel on them, and you're going to want to place it in the hole, and it's an angled hole, so getting it just right can be tough the first time. And these are just finger tightening. What you want to do is, if they get bound up, it's because the hole is not in the right position. You have a little bit of movement here. Move it so it goes all the way. So get this hand tightened, just some finger tension. These screws will hold their place once it's all done because of the tension. So you don't need to glue them down or lock them in super tight. So now you have one in. You still have a little bit of movement back and forth. You're going to need that for the other side. Second screw with the bezel, same deal. Now see, if you had this piece screwed down now, you wouldn't be able to get this screw all the way in because of the tension of the body. So you need to do the same thing you did on the other side. Move this head around just a little bit so that you can screw it down nice and evenly all the way in. Once you got these finger tight like this, just put your finger on it. It should be good. And now what you're going to do is you're going to go back to these screws and you're going to tighten them down. Now what this does is it creates the tension which is going to keep these screws on the side steady, because it pulls these two parts together tighter, which then puts pressure on the bezels here, which keep it from coming loose again. Oh, come on, see, that's what I was saying. Can be frustrating. You can try to drop it in, but if you drop it through the center hole, then you got to fish it back out again. Maybe you get lucky when you do that, maybe not. Last one. I just realized something. For your heat sink, for the blaster, it goes down inside of here. There is a set screw. Let me, guess I have to disassemble this again so I can make sure to show you everything. Because this needs to be set in place before you reattach these parts. Yes. Long videos with a boring moderator. It's really horrible, isn't it? Yeah, well, you're not here for me. You're here for this thing. Not quite. Okay. There we go. Okay. Now again, these should be able to be removed finger tight because this is now released. Getting them back out may be a little bit more of a challenge. You're just going to have to, there we go, have to see which one is a little bit looser than the other. And then use your fingers to turn it out. Once one has been turned out, the second one should also be able to be turned out if you get the angle right. You just got to tease it around a little bit to get it just right. It's a tough one because it's just a pressure hold, so you got to work it out slowly. But it's coming. There we go. Okay, so again, separate these two with a little bit of tension, pull it apart, and then just wiggle this piece loose. Slides right up and off. Okay, so you'll see here on the opposite side is your little hole. So you're going to want to put your finger inside of this chamber here just to keep it from sliding all the way down. Slide it in from the top. Push it down in. It's going to be a nice tight fit. And the key here for location is you see this slot right here. It should not go below. I don't know if you can really see inside there, but if you're looking in there, when you're assembling it, the heatsink should not cover this hole because this is the wiring hole. So it needs to just come to where it's just above where the hole starts, and that's your location. You take one of these little grub screws, put it in the hole, tighten it down. It's going to impact that heatsink, and it's in, fixed. Now, if you're using a NeoPixel adapter, that's not a problem. You just don't put that heatsink in, and instead you lock it down in with the grub screw in the same location, basically. Yeah. Okay. So let's get back to this. Slide this back on. Find the right location. The right angle, very carefully wiggling and wiggling. Give it a little, push this bar back a little bit here, and on in location. And now we quickly get back to putting it back where we were before. worry about getting it too finger tight yet, because we want them both in place before we put them down to the real tightness. Okay, they both get in place. Flick it around a little bit, get it placed. Okay, and now we're back once again, getting our screws on location. And the reason I'm not doing this with better tools that I do have is because I want to show you what it's like to do it with the kit you have. I've got, you know, little Allen wrenches that I can use that'll make this much faster. So if you've got them, feel free to use them. And if you have an Allen wrench tool that's long enough to fit through some of these locations, perfect. Keeps going in upside down. Come on now. Got it. Okay. We're all back together, locked in place. These are nice and tight now. You may be able to still unscrew them if it's just in the right location, maybe not, but let's make it down nice and tight. Okay. Next step is you're gonna wanna grab your little blaster section. So that's these 3 pieces. This extra one is extra, do as you like with it. So this one's another overhanging thing. We have to put this little heat sink in. See, it can still fit all the way down, which is a mistake. It needs to sit flat and be caught by the edges of the square, like this. Next step is a little bit of a weird overhang also, because if you put it upside down, this little insert piece will slip out. So you want to put it just to enough of an angle that it doesn't slip and the heat sink doesn't slide. Once you have it down, put the copper ring on, thread that on the top, and then thread it the rest of the way down. Give it some nice tension. Perfect. You can still always unscrew it. Okay, next is this little red switch activation. This is going to be your blaster blast and probably your primary activation switch. So you have to figure out which order to get it in. I like to do it like this, to put it up against the hole, find the right location based on just looking inside and looking for the hole of the nut, and put the red screw down on top. And if it needs to be moved around a little bit to find the right location, do what you got to do. Now, if you're just displaying it, you want to tighten this screw down all the way, because if you're just displaying it, there's not actually any motion. The motion needs to be there when you have the chassis in with electronics. If you have a chassis with electronics, you're going to want to leave it a little bit loose, because you want this, you want some back and forth motion. And the installer should find the exact right location so it sits on top of the switch and gives you activation. And then they should glue down that nut, or use thread lockers so it doesn't loosen off and fall off eventually. So for now, static, so we're going to tighten it down so it doesn't loosen up. Now that we're done poking inside of this piece, we're going to put on our door. So the door fits on right here. You have your 4 screws. Now, some people, and we also thought originally about having a door that was removable by magnets. It's even with magnets on here, it's very hard to get this door out. So that's what these 4 little teensy tiny bar magnets are for. So you can see these 4. So these 4 bar magnets need to be placed inside of this area. You'll see there's 4 slots. Now, because of the shape of these slots, you're going to need to shave down the edge of these magnets just a little bit. That's only if you want to make this door magnetic. But keep in mind, it's going to be display only. Because of the weight, these magnets will they'll keep it from falling over if you tip it upside down. But if you shake it and bang it, the door will fall off with the magnets. The magnets are too small to be effective for that. It's enough to hold it without shaking it. But that's up to you if that's a more advanced thing you want to do. So once you have this door in, take these 4 special screws and get them twisted in place. Now, the heads of these are a special size. They had to be smaller than the other ones because these holes here are smaller. So these roll in nice and neat. Snug but not too snug. Okay, you see it's locked in there. Now this piece here, this door, as well as this lid are made out of stainless steel. We wanted to make some color variances in the different parts to give it that, what we saw in the show, and what we can assume in reality is it's kind of a junkyard saver. The guy just put it together using whatever parts he could find. So we wanted to emulate that. Okay, so now you can put on your D-ring. This D-ring hole, or the hole inside here, is not a through hole, it stops. So your D-ring won't slide all the way through like this when you're with it, which is a good thing. So you're going to want to put in one edge. And then once you got that one edge in, you're basically just going to pull it to stretch it a little bit, and it'll click right in. And because you haven't used any tools to actually separate it, then there's no need to crimp it back down. And because it doesn't slide back and forth, it sits right where it should be. There you go. End cap, pretty straightforward, screws on. I'm going to set this one up as a static right now. Boom, like this. Be very cautious with this little screw when we put it in there. The screw area is very short, okay? And if you're not careful, you will strip this out because the threads on this piece are aluminum, they are not steel. So you want to put it down in, find its location, and then just tighten it up. You're going to want to put a little bit of pressure downward. You can use this if it helps. Push some pressure downward to get the threads in. Twist it in location. The threads are very short because of the thickness of the shaft right here. So it's a little bit cranky trying to get it in. more trouble than I thought on this one. I wonder, nope, that's fitting right. Okay, let me see what's going on here. Maybe these threads have a problem. I haven't run into this before. I'm going to come back to that. Moving along, you're going to want to put your, you're going to see that they have two little holes here on the side of this piece. They fit up with this. This is where your cables are going to go out, just so you know the right location, and then your screw holes will match up. Second screw in here. Find the right location, tighten it down. Okay, what do we got left? So let's put this on. See, there's a big block here and a matching keyhole there. That goes down. Since we're doing the static version, if it seems to get tight before it's too early, you got to do a little bit of wiggling to make sure everything's in its right location. A little bit of wiggling to get it in place right. Everything nice and tight. Okay. So now this black rubber piece, originally wanted to attach it with magnets. These were these other magnets, but the magnets didn't like to stay in there because of the rubber. So what we decided to do is, and this is where this double-sided double sticky tape comes in play. Let's go ahead and cut this a little bit shorter. Oh, well, that didn't work so well. Probably better to use a pair of scissors. Okay, so you're going to want to place, if you look on here, you'll see some nice real estate. You just place this double sticky tape right there, and on the bottom right here. Make sure the aluminum is nice and clean before you do it so you get a good fix. Peel your backing off. Hopefully I'm not the only one who always has trouble getting this sticky and the backing separated. I'm pretty sure I'm not. You just gotta really work at it sometimes. There we go. Don't use your fingertips because it puts oil on there. And then just put this down. If you have electronics, there'll be a switch sticking up right there, and then you'll simply be able to push in here to hit that switch. So when you have your installer do it, that's how they have to get it together. Okay, that's on. You can use more sticky tape, or in other places you can put it along the whole length if you like. The important part is to catch the edges so it doesn't peel itself back up. Okay, now comes the part you're not hoping for. this shaft is too long, and when it gets put in here with this red switch, it doesn't engage all the way because it sticks too far up. So you need to cut it back. You're going to want to cut the shaft basically 2 to 3 millimeters out, maybe about halfway down. I'll just make a nice little score along the edges where I want to cut it. You can use a Dremel, you can use whatever you want to cut this. If you have a nice fine grinder you're going to grind it down with, then there'll be a lot less work to do afterwards. Okay, got it separated. We now have our separated pieces. Come on, where's the camera? See, garbage. Now, because this piece is not shaped nicely, it's going to be very hard to get the thread in. So that's where the file comes into play. You're going to need to file down the shaft a bit so it gets a nice, so your threads come into a good position. So I simply just put it on the table, hold it with my fingers. You hold it with a tool if you like. You just got to be careful not to damage it. And then file it down. You'll see everything becoming much prettier as it cleans off the nastiness of the cut. Go onto the fine side and get it looking nice and neat. So then the first test you want to do, keep this thing off. You're going to put it in here to see if you can see if the threads match up. If it screws in and they match up, you're good. If not, go back to the filer. Okay, so I don't quite match up yet. Back to the filer. Give it a little bit more love here. And to try to make sure it's nice and even as well. Otherwise one thread will stick out too much. There we go. And we're good. Now that that's done, put our switch on, simply set it there. Go back to our screw. Now before, I'll show you how these fit together. This small bezel that I showed you before fits inside this ring. You'll see how that's how it holds it in position with enough tension that it doesn't wiggle around and that it can actually still slide back and forth for activation. So put that in position, screw it down. Like all the parts, you're gonna have to wiggle them around a little bit to get them to fit together, to find the right location. So now this is threaded in, and your switch, without movement up and down, can still easily move back and forth. Now, if you like, you could put some thread locker on this to keep it in position. Because if you have an activation and it's actually moving back and forth, it could be that this will slowly loosen over time. That's up to you if you want to lock it down or not. Okay. Now, we have these two left. These are just our sound vented and bladed top. These basically get stored if you're not doing that. This cap here needs to be fitted to here. Now it'll fit on just like this. Oh, flip that off. Okay, so it'll fit on just like this, but it will still come off. The idea is that you take this big magnet and you want to glue it in. because this is stainless steel, they hold together. So you're going to take a little dab. It helps to do a little bit of scoring inside of here to give the glue something more to fix onto. And you can do the same on the back of the magnet. Just give it some micro abrasions. And you just need a dab. Seriously, not much. Just one little drop. Once you got your drop in there, you just set this magnet in. Now, however long it takes that super glue to dry up, to solidify, don't put this on yet. If you put it on immediately, then the magnet will just immediately hook to the lid. So left over, you've got some little pieces here and there still left over. And I'll look at getting this screwed in. There it is. There's the assembly. If you have questions, comments, catch me on my Facebook. I can respond here on YouTube as well, but Facebook is going to be my primary location. There you go. Thanks for watching.